In 1999, a Nigerian president spent his entire first term telling Nigerians to be patient. By the time election season arrived, over 60% of his former supporters had quietly changed their minds, not through protest, not through opposition marches, not through any dramatic political rupture, but through exhaustion. Silent, daily, grinding exhaustion. Now here is what nobody is asking today. Is 2027 already repeating that exact pattern? And does the Tinubu administration even know it? There is one economic indicator that has historically predicted every Nigerian presidential second-term defeat since 1999. We will show you that number and what it currently reads before this video ends. Stay with me, because by the end of this analysis, you will understand something about Nigerian political gravity that even the people inside Aso Rock do not want to admit. Before we go further, if you're new here, Naija Update 24/7 exists for one reason: to give every Nigerian, wherever you are, whatever region you are from, the political analysis that mainstream media won't touch. Hit subscribe and stay with me. This gets deeper. Let us begin with what actually happened, because context is everything in Nigerian politics, and without it, the analysis that follows will not land the way it should. The 2023 general election produced the most legally contested presidential result in the history of Nigeria's Fourth Republic. The Supreme Court ultimately upheld Bola Tinubu's victory, but that ruling did not close the wound. It bandaged it, and underneath that bandage, the political infection continued. From the very first quarter of 2024, a cascade of economic shocks arrived in quick succession. The petrol subsidy removal sent pump prices spiraling. The naira went into a sustained devaluation that wiped out household savings and purchasing power, and food inflation reached levels that turned the daily act of eating into a financial calculation for millions of Nigerian families. Economists began using a phrase that this channel thinks deserves more attention than it has received: a legitimacy compounding problem. What that means in plain language is this: when a president whose mandate was already contested begins presiding over visible, tangible household pain, the two crises do not simply sit side by side, they amplify each other. The contested mandate makes the economic pain feel more personal, and the economic pain makes the contested mandate feel more consequential. Then in early 2025, state-level elections in key swing zones, Anambra, Odundo, and the governorship contests that political analysts feed into their 2027 projections produced results that showed something significant. The APC's organizational grip was loosening outside its stronghold states, not collapsing, loosening. But in electoral arithmetics, loosening at the margins is exactly where second-term bids are won or lost. Why is all of this resurfacing right now? Because the 2027 election cycle is no longer a distant abstraction. Political parties, the PDP, the Labour Party, and several new coalition conversations being held in hotels and private residences across the country are already in the early stages of candidate assessment. The window for the incumbent to consolidate and reinforce is narrowing faster than the administration appears to publicly acknowledge. And key political barons, the power brokers, the governors, the senators, the party financiers who helped engineer the 2023 result are visibly recalibrating their positions, some publicly, some privately, and some through the most telling signal in Nigerian politics: silence. Here is the historical frame that must sit underneath everything else we discussed today. In Nigeria's Fourth Republic, from 1999 to the present, not a single president has won a second term against dominant economic disapproval ratings, not one. President Goodluck Jonathan's 2015 defeat remains the clearest modern template, and the current political configuration, while not identical to 2015, rhymes with it in ways that should concern anyone paying close attention inside Aso Rock. Stop. Before we go any further, here is the fact that changes the entire frame of this analysis. Tinubu won the 2023 presidential election with the lowest raw vote share of any winning candidate since Nigeria returned to civilian rule in 1999. That is not a political insult. It is a structural, mathematical fact. And what it means for 2027 is this: his margin for erosion is historically thin. He cannot afford to lose the volume of supporters that Jonathan lost between 2011 and 2015. And the question this entire video is built around is whether he's already losing them. To understand where 2027 is heading, you have to understand the institutional terrain, the organizations, the constitutional frameworks, and the structural constraints that will shape whether the 2027 election is free, credible, and decisive. Start with INEC, the Independent National Election Commission. INEC is currently under pressure from multiple directions simultaneously. Civil society organizations are pushing hard for deeper voter verification reforms, political parties are probing the limits of campaign finance rules, and the institution is still in the middle of rebuilding its own credibility after the 2023 controversy around result transmission. The BVAS, the Bimodal Voter Accreditation System, and the IREV, the INEC Result Viewing Portal, remain at the center of ongoing litigation and ongoing reform conversations. The single most important question INEC must answer before 2027 is not logistical, it is reputational. Can it convince Nigerians across all regions, across all party affiliations, that the result it announces will be the result that actually occurred? If the answer is no, the consequences for political stability will extend far beyond Election Day.
Now, consider the National Assembly. APC does not hold a commanding majority in both chambers, and this is a constitutional constraint that the administration cannot simply wish away. Budget negotiations, constituency project funding, and any electoral amendment bills that touch the 2027 framework, all of these require legislative cooperation that the presidency does not fully control. And there is a more specific constitutional dimension to watch carefully. Any attempts to alter electoral timelines, modify delegate thresholds, or change the protocols around result transmission would require the National Assembly to cooperate. That cooperation is not guaranteed, and the political optics of attempting such changes, particularly in an environment of already heightened suspicion, would be corrosive. The judiciary remains a variable that is difficult to model but impossible to ignore. Post-2023 Supreme Court jurisprudence on electoral matters has become politically consequential in ways the court itself may not have fully anticipated. How courts rule on pre-election matters, candidate eligibility challenges, party primary disputes, governorship and senatorial results will collectively shape the political terrain before the presidential contest even officially begins. And then there are the governors. This is perhaps the most structurally important point in this entire section. Nigeria's federal system places enormous power in the hands of state executives. Of Nigeria's 36 governors, a significant number, including governors from APC states, are already positioning themselves as independent political actors rather than presidential loyalists. This is not minor. Governors control state party machinery, they control local government mobilization, they influence INEC's logistical capacity at the ground level. A president who cannot count on his own party's governors to deliver their states is a president who is governing on borrowed structural capital. And underpinning all of this is Section 134 of the 1999 Constitution as amended. To win the Nigerian presidency, a candidate must not only win an outright majority of votes cast, they must also achieve at least 25% of votes in no fewer than 25 states. In 2023, Tinubu cleared that bar, but only just. Replicating it in 2027 with a coalition that is visibly fraying is not simply a political challenge, it is a quantitative one. There is one specific state that every serious 2027 analyst is watching very closely right now, and it is not Lagos and it is not Kano. It is a mid-belt state whose electoral result could single-handedly determine whether any candidate crosses the 25-state threshold. We will name it before this video ends. Let us now move to the layer of analysis that most Nigerian media coverage either misses entirely or addresses too superficially: the political strategy layer. Who actually benefits from the early erosion of this administration's position? Who risks losing what they have built? And what is the real electoral arithmetic underneath all the noise? Begin with the beneficiaries. The Labour Party and Peter Obi's political network have not disappeared. The obedient movement, which the establishment in both APC and PDP spent enormous energy dismissing as a passing social media phenomenon, evolved after 2023 into something more durable, a distributed accountability network. These are organized, digitally connected, often young Nigerians who did not simply accept the 2023 result and move on. They channeled their energy into civil society monitoring, policy scrutiny, and an ongoing political conversation. Any early cycle indicator of presidential weakness reactivates this base with a speed and volume that traditional party structures cannot match. Within the PDP, there is a faction, quiet but serious, that does not want to repeat the mistakes of 2023. They watched a divided opposition hand the presidency to APC, and they are watching APC's internal cohesion very carefully now, waiting for a moment of visible fracture that would create the political conditions for a consolidation candidate to emerge with credibility. The PDP's fundamental challenge has always been unity, but necessity, as we will discuss shortly, is a powerful unifier. And here's the part that is rarely discussed openly. Some of the actors most interested in a weakened Tinubu presidency are inside APC itself. Governors with personal 2027 presidential ambitions, and there are several, benefit from a presidency that is visibly struggling. A president who cannot deliver federal resources to political allies, who cannot protect those who supported him, who cannot command the loyalty of state-level structures, that president becomes less useful as a patron. The internal competition inside APC for the post-Tinubu future is real, it is quiet, and it is already underway. On the other side, who risks losing influence as this erosion continues? The Tinubu political family's network of Lagos-anchored economic and political capital faces genuine exposure. The Lagos machine has operated for over 2 decades as the most sophisticated political organization in southern Nigeria. Its national leverage, its ability to translate Lagos's economic weight into national political currency is tied to the presidency's strength. If that presidency weakens, so does Lagos's claim to speak for the entire Yoruba political interest, let alone for the nation. Federal ministers and senior appointees whose careers are entirely built on this administration's survival face a version of this same exposure. They are the most motivated defenders of the status quo, and paradoxically, sometimes the least effective ones, because their defensiveness is transparently self-interested. And the traditional political structures in the north that made peace with Tinubu's 2023 candidacy did so on a specific expectation that a northern vice president in the Shettima position would translate into real power sharing and potentially into that northern figure ascending to the presidency in 2027. If Tinubu runs for a second term and the northern political establishment reads that as a broken arrangement, the coalition calculus for 2027 becomes significantly more complex for APC. Now, here is something that is rarely discussed in plain language, and it's important enough to pause the entire analysis for a moment. In 2023, Tinubu did not win because Nigerians chose him overwhelmingly. He won because his opposition was split 3 ways. If any 2 of those forces consolidate before 2027, just 2, the arithmetic of that election changes completely, not metaphorically, not as a rhetorical device. Literally, mathematically, the numbers shift. And every serious 2027 coalition conversation happening right now in Abuja, Port Harcourt, and Kano is about solving exactly that consolidation problem.
The opposition's holy grail is a credible candidate who can build a genuinely national coalition, one that speaks to Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa Fulani, and minority communities simultaneously. That has never been easy in Nigerian politics, but it has been done before. The silent stakeholders watching all of this, traditional rulers who publicly stay neutral while privately calibrating based on resource flows from Abuja, the Nigerian business elite who are watching the exchange rate with direct financial stakes, and a civil society and press that is more emboldened than at any point in recent memory. These actors will shape the political conversation whether they intend to or not. Now, if what I just told you surprises you, drop a comment below. I want to know what you think before we get to the part that changes everything. Let us bring this analysis from the level of political strategy down to the level of daily life, because ultimately, that is what politics is supposed to be about. Nigeria's federalism has always been asymmetric. Abuja is the center of gravity for federal resources, security coordination, and political authority.
What many analysts miss is that a weakening presidency does not automatically create stronger, more effective states. It often creates a vacuum, and vacuums in Nigerian politics tend to be filled not by governance but by positioning. Governors who should be focused on schools, hospitals, and infrastructure spend their energy calculating their 2027 scenarios instead. Ministers who should be implementing policy spend their time protecting their portfolios. Nigeria has been through this kind of political paralysis before, in the final years of both the Obasanjo and Jonathan administrations. And the lesson from those periods is consistent. The cost of elite political distraction is always paid by ordinary citizens, not by the elite doing the distraction. At the level of economic reality, this is where the analysis becomes most concrete and most important. Inflation running above 30% for consecutive quarters. A naira that has shed more than 60% of its value since the middle of 2023. Petrol prices that have cascaded directly into the cost of transportation, food production, and healthcare access. These are not abstract macroeconomic data points. They are the daily financial reality of a market trader in Onitsha trying to buy wholesale, of a civil servant in Kaduna calculating whether their salary will cover rent and food simultaneously, of a smallholder farmer in Benue watching the cost of fertilizer and fuel exceed the value of what they can sell at harvest. Political uncertainty compounds economic uncertainty in a very specific way that foreign investors and development finance institutions understand clearly, even when it goes under-discussed in domestic Nigerian media. A president who is perceived as vulnerable to a genuinely contested 2027 result introduces what capital markets call sovereign risk, a discount that investors apply to Nigeria's investment attractiveness. Foreign direct investment decisions, which Nigeria desperately needs to begin meaningfully diversifying away from oil revenue dependence, are sensitive to this risk perception. And a government that is increasingly focused on political survival rather than economic reform creates exactly the kind of policy unpredictability that makes investors wait. Remember that economic indicator I mentioned at the very start of this video, the one that has historically predicted every presidential second-term defeat in Nigeria since 1999. It is the real purchasing power of the minimum wage, adjusted for inflation. In every single case where a sitting Nigerian president lost their re-election bid, that number had declined by more than 40% in real terms during their first term. The current figure for the Tinubu administration? We will let economists debate the precise decimal, but no credible analyst this channel has reviewed places the decline below 45%. That is the gravitational force this administration is navigating. That is what political gravity actually means when it is expressed in numbers that affect kitchens, schools, and hospitals. On the question of interfaith and interethnic relations, and this channel speaks on this with deliberate care, the most dangerous political terrain in Nigeria has always been the intersection of economic stress and identity politics. When people cannot feed their families, when they feel that the system has failed them, political actors who want to mobilize that frustration along ethnic and religious lines find more willing audiences. The antidote, and it is the antidote that Naija Update 24/7 has always believed in, is the recognition that Nigerians from the north, the south, the east, and the west share more economic interests than any political actor wants them to realize. A farmer in Sokoto and a trader in Aba are both hurt by the same naira collapse. That is a national reality, not a regional one. The 2027 Nigerian election will not be decided in Washington or London, but what happens in those capitals and in Beijing and Geneva will shape the political and economic environment inside which 2027 is contested. The United States and the United Kingdom both monitored Nigeria's 2023 election closely, and both issued diplomatic statements that included the careful phrase, "concerns about the process." In diplomatic language, that phrase carries more weight than it appears to on the surface. Neither country took strong retaliatory action, but the credibility question from 2023 sits as an unresolved background variable in bilateral conversations. How Nigeria manages its 2027 process will either repair or deepen that credibility gap in the eyes of Western governments whose support Nigeria needs on debt relief, trade, and security cooperation. Nigeria's engagement with the IMF and World Bank on macroeconomic reform means those institutions have a direct institutional stake in Nigeria's political stability. A competitive, contested 2027 election cycle, particularly one that generates post-election disputes similar to 2023, creates exactly the kind of sovereign risk signal that international financial institutions factor into their lending and support conditions.
In West Africa, the picture is complicated by the regional security context. The wave of coups in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger effectively destabilized ECOWAS at the moment when Nigeria needed the regional body to project collective strength. Nigeria is the dominant power in ECOWAS, economically, militarily, and diplomatically. But a president who is domestically weakened, whose political attention is increasingly absorbed by survival calculations rather than regional statecraft, has reduced leverage when he sits at the ECOWAS table. And China, which holds significant debt exposure across several Nigerian infrastructure projects, is watching Abuja's political stability with an investor's eye. For the Nigerian diaspora, and this channel speaks directly to Nigerians in London, Houston, Toronto, Dubai, and everywhere else the Nigerian community has built itself, you are not passive observers of what is happening at home. The Nigerian diaspora remits more than $20 billion annually to Nigeria, a figure that in some quarters exceeds oil sector revenue. That makes diaspora Nigerians economic actors with direct skin in the game on exchange rate policy, on fiscal governance, and on which direction Nigeria takes in 2027. The question of whether a formal diaspora voting mechanism, still proposed but not yet implemented, becomes a reality before 2027 is one that deserves serious pressure from diaspora communities, not just hope. Any analysis that only presents one side of a political argument is advocacy, not analysis. So let us seriously engage the strongest arguments against the thesis of this video, because those arguments deserve a fair hearing. The first and most powerful counter-argument is incumbency advantage. Incumbents in Nigeria control federal patronage, the security apparatus, party machinery at the state and local government level, and significant media access. These are real, structural, durable advantages. No opposition movement has ever defeated a sitting Nigerian president purely on the strength of public opinion. It has always required the combination of a credible candidate, significant financial resources, and structural defections from within the ruling party. The Tinubu team is not unaware of this reality. They are actively working on state-level consolidation, and they have 18 months or more to do it. The counterpoint, however, is this. Incumbency advantage is real, but it is not deterministic. Jonathan had every one of those structural advantages in 2015. He had the security apparatus, the federal budget, the party machinery, the media relationships, and he still lost. The question is not whether the advantages exist, it is whether the administration can translate them into genuine voter persuasion among the demographics that are most visibly dissatisfied, among urban youth, among the economically stressed middle class, among the communities who feel that their daily reality has deteriorated since 2023. The second counter-argument is that the opposition is simply too divided to consolidate. This is genuinely the most credible challenge to the thesis that 2027 is winnable for the opposition. Every potential challenger has some kind of ceiling, a regional ceiling, a religious ceiling, a credibility ceiling, that prevents them from independently building a national coalition broad enough to clear the constitutional threshold. The counterpoint here is historical rather than speculative. That argument was considered equally credible in 2014 when the idea of merging ACN, CPC, ANPP, and factions of other parties into a single APC was described by many analysts as organizationally impossible. Political necessity proved those analysts wrong. Whether opposition actors in 2027 can replicate that discipline under the pressure of necessity is genuinely uncertain,
but to dismiss the possibility entirely is not analysis. It is a form of wishful thinking that serves one political interest over others. The third argument is that economic pain does not straightforwardly translate into votes in Nigerians' political culture. The argument goes that Nigerian voters are too embedded in ethnic loyalty networks and patronage structures to vote against their community leaders' endorsed candidate, regardless of macroeconomic conditions. The counterpoint is 2023 itself. That election produced something genuinely new, a block of urban, digitally connected, politically literate Nigerians who voted on policy conviction rather than ethnic instruction. Over 6 million votes for a candidate whose path to victory was blocked by the very structural advantages we just described. That block has not dissolved. Based on every civil society monitoring report and every university research survey conducted since 2023, it has grown. What it does in 2027 depends on whether it has a candidate and a coalition worthy of its organization. What does all of this mean for Nigeria as a whole? North, South, East, and West? It means that what determines 2027 will not be which region votes hardest for its own candidate. It will be whether Nigerians across all regions can ask the same question at the same moment. Has my life materially improved? That is a national question, and the answer to that question does not have an ethnic accent or a religious qualification. In the next 12 to 18 months, watch for several specific movements from the key actors in this political drama. From the presidency, expect a deliberate pivot towards visible infrastructure commissioning, projects that create images that can be pointed to that generate local employment and local gratitude. Expect targeted economic relief announcements designed to address specific pressure points among key demographic groups. And expect intensified engagement with traditional and religious leaders across both the North and the South, because in Nigeria, the endorsement infrastructure of traditional institutions remains a meaningful mobilization tool, particularly in non-urban communities. The political calendar will become increasingly visible inside policy decisions. That is not cynicism. It is simply how electoral democracies work everywhere in the world. Once again, kindly remember to subscribe to my channel. I understand it means nothing to you, but it means everything to me. This work of research and analysis cost me a lot, and the only means of paying me back is your subscription. Thank you.
From the opposition, expect the early architecture of coalition conversations to become more formal and more public by the end of 2025. The central negotiation will be over zoning, specifically whether a northern or southern presidential candidate makes more strategic sense for defeating APC in 2027, given the constitutional threshold requirements. That conversation will be uncomfortable, it will be contested, and it will reveal which opposition actors are serious about winning and which are serious only about positioning. From APC governors, watch the language very carefully. When a governor who was a visible supporter of the presidency begins using phrasing like, "We support Mr. President, but our people are telling us," that is not a casual statement. In the grammar of Nigerian political communication, that construction is a formal distancing signal. It is how defection or non-cooperation begins to announce itself publicly before it becomes institutional. Now, the state I promised to name. The state that every serious 2027 analyst is watching, not because it is the largest or the most famous, but because of its structural electoral significance, is Benue. Benue sits at the intersection of north-central politics in a historically contested zone where Christian and Muslim communities, TIV and non-TIV political interests, and federal resource allocation grievances all converge. Its 2027 governorship race will serve as a leading indicator of which direction the entire Middle Belt swings in the presidential contest. And the Middle Belt, as every Nigerian political historian will confirm, has been the decisive swing region in every close presidential election Nigeria has held. Benue is its barometer. Watch it. The signals that would confirm that the political erosion we have described today is accelerating into a genuine crisis for the administration are a major APC defection at the gubernatorial or senatorial level before the end of 2025, a formal coalition announcement between Labour Party and any PDP faction with a named presidential candidate, exchange rate deterioration beyond a critical threshold that triggers a second wave of mass public protest, or any INEC regulatory action on party funding or candidate eligibility that is perceived, rightly or wrongly, as targeted rather than neutral. And regardless of what happens in 2027, regardless of who runs, who wins, and who contests the result, the political dynamics now in motion are already reshaping Nigeria's institutions in ways that will outlast any individual administration. The APC as a party is being redefined by this period. The presidency as an institution is being stress-tested in ways that will set precedents. And the expectations that young Nigerians hold of their elected leaders, the threshold of accountability they are now demanding, that expectation has been permanently raised. No Nigerian president who comes after this moment will be able to govern as though that expectation does not exist. I asked at the start of this video whether 2027 is already repeating a historical pattern of presidential erosion. Here is the measured, evidence-based answer. The structural conditions that have preceded every second-term defeat in Nigeria's Fourth Republic, economic pain above a historically significant threshold, a fracturing coalition, a mobilized urban opposition, and the mathematics of a thin original mandate are present in some form today. That does not mean the outcome of 2027 is predetermined. Politics is not gravity. It can be interrupted. Circumstances change. Administrations reform. Oppositions collapse under their own contradictions. All of these things are possible. But the burden of proof in Nigerian political science has historically rested on the incumbent to demonstrate that they have broken the pattern, not on the opposition to prove they can break through. That is what 2025 and 2026 will test, and this channel will be watching every move. If this analysis gave you clarity, share it with one Nigerian who needs to understand what is really happening. Like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Naija Update 24/7. We never stop watching.